5 Live Drive. In depth.
So, after 6:30 here on Drive, we're going to be taking an in-depth look at the market in the UK for puppies.
That's because a group of MPs says it's time to stamp out what they call car boot dog sellers, unregistered people who sell pets raised in illegal puppy farms where poor welfare standards are present, and to stop people buying dogs over the internet.
This all comes on the day that the Border Force impounded more than 100 puppies that were being illegally smuggled into Wales from Eastern Europe via Ireland.
We're supposed to be a nation of animal lovers and to see dogs as our best friends. So why do so many of us not care where our dogs come from or how they're looked after? Let us know what you think. You can text 85058 or we're at BBC 5 Live.
On digital, online, smartphone and tablet. This is BBC 5 Live.
Now, over the next 20 minutes or so, we're going to talk about the puppy trade. It's an industry worth an estimated £300 million a year in the UK. And today, a group of MPs argues it's in desperate need of regulation.
The Environment, Food and Rural Affairs Committee wants a ban on pet shops and online dealers selling puppies. It says third-party sales have an unavoidable negative impact on their welfare and that only breeders should be allowed to sell to the public.
Well, it comes as the police and RSPCA say they've rescued 100 puppies from Holyhead Port in North Wales. They're only about 6 weeks old and were being kept in unventilated vehicles without food and water. So does the industry need to be tightened up? 85058 for your thoughts at BBC 5 Live. We're going to talk to Paul Monaghan, SNP MP, sits on the committee and co-wrote today's report. Nigel Baker, Chief Executive of the Pet Industry Federation, which represents pet retailers. Tom Monksford also joins us, who bought a puppy through the internet, had to have it put down just 2 days later. And Janine Waters in the studio with her Pekingese Olive. Evening all.
Good evening.
Good evening.
Evening to Olive as well. I feel like we need to keep the sound down a bit, but Olive's very happy with us here. Janine, when we mention all those figures there, and we'll hear more from Paul in a moment, feel free, all of you, to chip in and be part of this. But when you hear those figures, you're sat here with your own Pekingese too. I just wonder how that makes you feel.
Heart-wrenching. You know, I wasn't aware it was as big. When I hear the numbers that you've just been telling me and the amount of dogs that are involved, that's massive. From my point of view, from where I come, people breed dogs properly, and I'm part of the Kennel Club Assured Breeder Scheme, and I take part in breeding dogs correctly with the right health and the right health tests and measures that you need to do to let people rest assured that their dog that they're taking home from me has had the best opportunities and the best upbringing it can have while I have it.
We're going to meet Olive in just a moment. But Paul, is that pretty much the norm, as Janine was saying, that people don't realise these figures are so high?
Yes, I think that is the case, actually. What we're looking at here is the industrial scale breeding of animals in some establishments. That consequently results in very poor health, often the genetic unviability of dogs, and a lack of transparency in the route to market, as we might say. And lots of people unwittingly buy a pet that turns out to have very poor health and results in enormous vet bills and often, sadly, the death of the dog involved. I think it's fair to say that we do see in this country some oversupply in the breeding of dogs, and a trend towards the breeding of designer dogs like Labradoodles, Cockapoo and things like that are very attractive to consumers, people that want a family pet. But they are being bred in very, very poor conditions indeed. And that was something that the Select Committee looked at very closely and has tried to address in today's report.
Given all of that, given that it's £300 million a year in the UK, such an industry, then how can you even go about trying to stop it?
Well, it's certainly going to be a challenge. I think it's fair to say that whilst it is a fairly large industry in the UK, we found that very little of that money actually ends up in the hands of the dog breeders themselves. Most of the money is taken up by middlemen and by the final retailer. A good example would be a breeder that we visited in South Wales that was breeding French bulldogs and getting something like £150 for each puppy. We understand understand, and we were able to evidence that the retail price for a French Bulldog puppy was £2,000. So where did the £1,850 go between the breeder and the consumer? That was evidence, I think, of the scale of the problem that we face, but also the number of middlemen that appear to be involved in this whole process from breeding to actual sale.
Nigel Baker, you represent pet retailers. Is that something that you recognise too, those sorts of figures that Paul was talking about?
To a degree, but I think this the industry of puppies and selling puppies is in a bit of a muddle, mainly because I'm not sure everybody understands the whole basis of how this is actually happening. If you sell any animal in the UK and you commercially sell animals in the UK, you need a licence, and that's called a pet shop licence. So even if you don't have a pet shop, you can have a pet shop licence.
Right.
Okay, that's number one. So to some degree, our members who are traditional high street pet shops get fairly pulled down by the fact that the pet trade or the pet shops are told they're the people causing the problems with puppies. They actually aren't necessarily the problem causing the puppies. Out of all the licences that are issued in the UK, and I can talk about the UK and Wales because we've recently done a freedom of information on licensing across pet establishments, there's about 2,500 retail or people who have pet shop licences in the UK, in England and Wales, not Scotland because they're under a different legislation. Out of those 2,500, there's about 130 who are selling pets from their homes, effectively. So it's not the 2,500 out there who have pet shops that are selling puppies or anything else. There's 130. If you then take the 130 and say they could be fish people or fish breeders, etc., you're down to 80 licences of people who are selling puppies, and out of those 80 there are 30 high street pet shops who still sell puppies. So out of the 2,500 licences out there, only 30 high street pet shops sell puppies.
It seems to be acknowledged, doesn't it, that it's these backstreet breeders who are making the money. I've already admitted that because I've got two Westies. My first one,
that, yes.
yeah, first one bought from a recognised breeder, met mum and dad. Second one was a hellhole, and we felt we were rescuing the dog. And PH has just texted in here saying, we bought a Westie from the Dudley area last year, travelled for miles after being told there were 2 pups left, then given the runaround for ages, just saw 1 pup at a yard or a stable, no sign of mum, like you, me. We didn't want to leave her behind, she's great, but did we do right? So there's a lot of people feeling quite guilty now. So Paul, I'll go back to you on this one.
Yeah.
We were told earlier that we ought to have left our puppies there to their fate, and that would maybe discourage breeders. Would that be the case? I'm not sure it would be.
I think it probably would discourage breeders. Certainly that was the view that we took in the committee. I mean, I think just going back for a second to the issue of pet shop licences, I think it's the case that the pet shop licence regime is completely ineffective. We've come across numerous examples of individuals selling animals with no licence whatsoever. And we've also just heard that, people with animals that they're selling from their home have a pet shop licence. Pet shop licence not often taken up by people trading on the internet, and I think the general issue is that the legislation surrounding the trade in animals is woefully out of date. Again, something that we looked at in the report. Coming back to your point about what should an individual do when they're trying to buy a puppy, the advice is really very straightforward. Never ever buy a puppy unless you've seen it with its mother. Now, we've come across examples where unscrupulous individuals have used a dog that's unrelated to puppies but will be of the same breed and tried to pass it off to consumers as a family of dogs, as it were. I would encourage anybody that's looking for a puppy to make sure that the dog that they see with the pups is actually the mother, and there is very good guidance on the internet available on how you can test for that.
Okay, well, Janine's a registered breeder. What do you want to say, Janine? You wanted to try and...
Yeah, the thing that strikes me there is you say people sell dogs from home without a licence. I don't have a licence, and you need to breed more than 4 litters in a year to obtain a licence. Now, I don't. I've only had 1 litter in the last 3 years, but I follow all of the guidelines that's set to me by the Kennel Club and breed my dogs correctly and properly.
Can I just chip in there and just say that if you look at the puppy or the dog population in the UK, nobody's totally sure how many dogs are in the UK. The PFMA, the Pet Food Manufacturers Association, annual survey thinks there's about 8.5 million out there. But in the EFRA report, it ran up to about 1.9 million potentially, puppies that were needed a year. If you take 8 million dogs in the UK and say they live for 10 years, that would mean you would need 800,000 puppies a year to service the UK if it's a static market, and it is fairly static at the moment. And then if you boil those numbers down, the Kennel Club registrations, which I think, Janine, you're a member of the Kennel Club,
Yes.
have 265,000 puppies available a year. Best guess is there's about 350,000 UK home breeders, and that's people who basically don't have a licence, but breed one litter occasionally, and they might give them to friends or sell them to friends, etc. But that leaves a shortfall of around about 185,000 puppies needed a year, and that's where the problem starts.
We say that's where the problem starts. Tony, you were mentioning the fact that you went on the internet to look for your dog too. Let's bring Tom in, because Tom, you bought a puppy through the internet, didn't you? Tell us your story.
Well, we wanted to, expand the family and get a puppy. So the first place I went was online. And, I went through various different websites and I found a puppy that seemed quite close. Emailed the person, the email back saying, yeah, great. We saw the advice online to see it with mum, so I did say we want to see it with the mum. We went there, it seemed like a family home, went into the living room, and he brought out this puppy and handed it to us. We didn't get to pick from a litter. Then we asked, where's the mother? And he brought out this dog, which on hindsight, we realise now probably wasn't the mother, because the way that it didn't really interact with the puppies, it just came out, it was there. And then again, on hindsight, there was other puppies there, not just the beagle, which we asked for. But at the time, we saw this little puppy's face. He was just so, lethargic. He was just in our arms. We thought, oh, we've got a nice calm puppy. We just, when you're facing this puppy and it's in your arms, and then when it comes to actually buying the puppy, we handed the money over and we said, okay, when can we come back to collect? He was like, oh no, take it now. Which again, on hindsight, we didn't, because it was our first puppy, we didn't know what we should and shouldn't do. It was awful what happened, because the health of the puppy.
What was wrong with it, Tom? What happened?
Well, overnight it had become ill, and had diarrhea and sickness, and the so-called breeder, the seller, he had given us this information sheet which said, silly things like blood in the poo is normal. And thinking back, how did we ever believe this?
Yeah, but if you've never had a dog before, I know you panic, don't you, half the time?
We do.
Janine, what is the problem here then? Just talk to me. You're obviously not involved, so I'm not coming to you for first-hand experience. But what's happening here? Are people like the breeders I bought mine off, or Tom, are they going to other breeders and buying a whole litter off them?
Well, I'm not sure what's happened in this case, but clearly,
no, generally,
he should never have took that puppy home. He should have been armed with a checklist of things and questions that he needed to be asking that person that was selling that dog. Is it wormed? Is it microchipped? Is it vaccinated? Where's it been kept? Is it socialised? Has it got any litter brothers or sisters? Has the mother been bred from before? There's lots of questions. You can find these questions on the Kennel Club website as well, and a guidance of what you should be looking for when you come to buy a puppy. It's not always the case you're going to turn up at a place and it's going to be spotless clean, but 9 times out of 10, people who are breeding dogs are doing it because they thoroughly enjoy it and they want people to have a lifelong pet who they're going to love and adore.
And Tom, I'm not accusing you of anything here, and you talk about hindsight, and obviously it was incredibly sad what happened, but at no point when you were searching on the internet did you think, am I looking for someone that's registered, or did you think of those checks that maybe you should look for?
At the time I didn't. I just went onto the various different websites that sell the puppies, and they've got their own little make sure you ask for mother and things like that, but it was only
was it a cost thing, Tom?
It was it did come into my mind. It wasn't the only factor, but it was ease of being able to find the website, ease of being able to message the person, ease of being able to get to the person. It was only after sadly the puppy passed away that we actually then went onto the Kennel Club and realised actually we were completely wrong. We should have looked at this information first, and we did eventually buy a puppy in the future from Kennel Club club registered breeder.
Paul Monaghan, during your investigation, how does it work then? How are these illegal breeders getting hold of it? Are they breeding dogs without regulation, or are they buying up whole litters and selling them for twice the price? How does it work?
Well, as you can imagine, it's quite complicated. So first of all, people breeding in the UK might not necessarily be illegal. They might have all of the necessary licences and all the rest of it, but they're breeding dogs, as I've said already, on an industrial scale with very low, if in fact any health standards whatsoever being applied to the dogs. What we were able to evidence was that breeders running and managing puppy farms take orders from traders for specific breeds of dogs. So they might have 5 cockerpoos and 3 spaniels, or whatever it turns out to be. They will then purchase those dogs at relatively low cost, £50 upwards, something like that. Travel long distance with them, perhaps pass them on to a second trader who will then pass them on to somebody else. We did come across one example where there were 11 different traders in a chain before it actually got to the individual who eventually sold the dogs on to consumers. So a convoluted and very complex chain with very few individuals having any regard at all for regulations and licensing along the way. There's another example where dogs are being imported, puppies are being imported from Eastern Europe often into the UK, picked up by traders and then sold on to consumers also.
Yeah, Kat's been on from Oxford. Crazy name, crazy girl. I mean, it's very apt for the discussion. Kat, there's no shortage of dogs or puppies in this country. Please remember all the dogs in rescue centres all over the country. They desperately need loving homes. Older dogs make great pets too, not just puppies. It's something to bear in mind. And also the other thing to bear in mind is when you're buying a puppy, even if you buy it from a regulated breeder, it's still a risk in it to a certain extent. And Lottie's on the line from London. Hello, Lottie.
Hi, hello there. Hi.
Lottie, staggering the amount of money mentioned in your text. I'll let you tell the story. What's happened to you?
Well, my partner and I decided in our sort of late 30s, without children yet, to get a dog. We did a lot of research. It took us a year before we got him. We attended dog shows and all sorts of things to meet the breed. We then researched through the Kennel Club, found our breeder, very reputable breeder. We went along and obviously fell in love with the dog. We went through everything. We saw the mother and the father. And 6 months later, he was fine to start off with. He started displaying some odd behavioural signs and was quite poorly. And we were walking in one day in Hyde Park. He collapsed, and we took him immediately to the vets. And from then on, he was diagnosed with something called syringomyelia, which is a brain disorder where his brain is too big for his skull. And sadly, it's degenerative. And then our life effectively turned upside down. And 4 years, he's cost $40,000 in vet bills, which, of course, you have to pay and claim back. I mean, at one point, I had someone working on my team with me who administered all his paperwork. It was crazy. Time and effort going to, specialist appointments, MRI scans. He has 3 different medicines 3 times a day. He can't go to anywhere when we go on holiday. He has to go to a specialist place. He has acupuncture, hydrotherapy. He has more treatments than we do, and an incredibly comfortable life. But at the sake of our own, we've had to seriously suffer, and so has he. Is
that not one of the risks just of buying any animal, Lottie? Because I know you think you say. Did you go back to the breeder? What was said?
We did. Well, no. I mean, to be honest, I started turning my hand to campaigning for a while because I was so horrified as to what I found when we unearthed the issues behind this with the Kennel Club, and not just really the Kennel Club, but the breeders and the way they function. We found that our breeder ended up having a network of breeders that he would work with so he could breed more dogs of his bloodline within a certain year, which is, I believe, is illegal, but the Kennel Club allow them to get away with it. The breeder wouldn't have anything to do with us. I had to turn into a detective myself and discovered that his father was then sent away to Russia just after he was diagnosed with this serious condition to breed more puppies in Eastern Europe. So it's actually, it's not just a fact of getting any puppy. The gene for syringomyelia is very common in the breeds that we bought, and we look into health tests. I feel like we were completely duped by the breeder.
Yeah.
The guy, I've had a lot of problems with this particular person on the internet when I've been talking about it. It's been very problematic, and to be honest, I've been silenced.
Okay, Lottie, we've got, Janine, obviously you don't represent the Kennel Club. Short notice for the Kennel Club, we don't have a response from them. But what do you make of what you've just heard, Janine, from Lottie?
Well, obviously the integrity of that breeder, he's got none. He should have retired that dog and it should never have been bred from again, as with the other lines that are associated with the dog. I can't comment further, what the Kennel Club's action should have been towards this person. But I do know that there's new health tests and gene mapping that they're doing for dogs, so we can, as a breeder, if there's a health issue in our breed, we can gene map our dogs and breed this out eventually, or avoid it as best we can. But obviously in this lady's instance, it's terrible.
No, we've had a text here saying we bought our pup through a registered Kennel Club breeder. He nearly died 2 days after we collected him with a mystery virus. Her words when I contacted her to warn the other 12 puppy owners were, well, at least he's insured, you'll get your money back. Thankfully, he recovered and is now a healthy Russian Black Terrier. Paul Monaghan, all these stories just make it so apparent how difficult it is to regulate this industry.
Absolutely. I think Lottie and Tom's experiences are frankly all too common. Lottie's highlighting the fact that many breeders running puppy farms are breeding dogs that are genetically unviable. There is no consideration given to breeding lines and things like that would be important perhaps to kennel cub breeders. It's a significant issue. We were really challenged by the sights and the sounds and the evidence that we witnessed when we were gathering evidence for this report. It's a carefully worded report, it's considered, and it is very specifically designed to address all of the issues that we see as major failings in the animal welfare industry in England particularly.
Yeah. We've only got a couple of minutes left, so it'd be good to try and get to some sort of resolution as to where we go now. But a DEFRA spokesperson has told 5 Live, we share the public's high regard for animal welfare. We are proud the UK has some of the highest animal welfare standards in the world. We are currently reviewing animal establishment licensing in England to ensure local authorities can robustly enforce these high standards.
I was going to add that we're actually working with DEFRA and helping on that, because I think the answer is to try and enforce the law in a much better way than it is. We're dealing with a 1951 Act at the moment, which is clearly outdated. The Animal Welfare Act is a good act. The 2006 Act provides for the 5 animal needs, which everyone should be aware about. And I think people just need to get streetwise about buying puppies and understanding what they're taking on, where they get them from, and the heritage of the puppy in the beginning. We're not for a ban. I think a ban is just going to squelch out the problem. It's going to appear somewhere else. It's being tried in America, in certain states. It was tried in Austria and came back in because they couldn't deal with it either. It all went underground. And I think all the charities and everybody has to get together to try and make the problem a reasonable problem so that it doesn't become the issue that it is today.
And Lottie, just briefly, what would you like to see done?
Well, we've had our dog tested. All his MRI scans have been performed as part of the British Veterinary Association scheme that the Kennel Club now run. But we've had to pay for that to be done. The breeder didn't want to move. He didn't want to know. He hasn't had anything to do with us since. He's actually a top judge also, so he's very well respected, but was more concerned about his own name and the bloodline name than the welfare of the dog. But I know in certain countries, in Norway, I think it is, in our particular breed, which is Brussels Griffon, they have very good health policies and ways of trying to breed out this gene that they find. Yeah. But there's too many underground breeders, and not even underground breeders, well-profiled breeders who are breeding through a network. Okay,
Lottie, we've got to leave it there. Thanks for getting in touch. Thanks to Paul, thanks to Nigel, thanks to Tom, thanks to Janine, thanks to Olive. So see Mum if you're buying a dog from a breeder, or maybe buy a dog from a shelter, and make sure your dog's insured. I've tweeted out a picture of me and Olive, and we share the same hair colour, which is a bit weird, sadly. Now look at the photograph.
For Olive.
Sadly for Olive, yeah. We're back tomorrow. We'll see you then. Here's Mark Pugach.